Welcome back to the program. It is time for our hot potato political roundtable. Two new guests this week. We have Sylvester Smith, who is with us. He is an attorney, a business consultant, and a government affairs specialist.
Thanks for having me,
Clarke Tucker,
Roby.
former state representative, former congressional candidate, attorney, soon to be state senate candidate, correct?
That's right.
All right.
Thank you,
good.
Roby.
Good to have both of y'all.
Glad to be here.
As we always do before our political roundtable, we do rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first. And Clarke Tucker won I think it was rock over scissors is what it was. So Clarke, you get to start off with our hot potato topics. What you bring?
I've got a lot of recent experience in that because that's how my son and I resolve who's going to go first in a one-on-one basketball game. So my topic is something that's gotten a lot of attention this week, and rightly so, which is state control of Little Rock School District and the future of that. And I think it's important to kind of look back. I personally don't think that the state should have ever taken over the Little Rock School District. They did so because 6 schools out of 48 were supposedly in academic distress. I think within the first year it was clear that at least three of the schools were moving in the right direction because they were removed from academic distress. If there were any question, which I don't think there was, but if there were any question, the state should have returned local control at that point, but they did not. And in the intervening 4.5 years, it's just been a litany of excuses. Never one time has the state board put together a plan for academic improvement publicly with the Little Rock School District. Never one time has the state board laid out the criteria for the Little Rock School District to retain, get back local control. And I think to say that their rule of the district has been negligent would be very generous. And really about the first thing they've done that I've kind of agreed with is they've had these public forums this week.
And they've been heated, for sure.
They've been heated,
yeah.
and again, rightly so. People have had their voice taken away. In my opinion, it's taxation without representation right now. We have no say as members of the Little Rock community about the State Board of Education, and I think Johnny Key should have been there. I think it's a mistake for him not to be there. I think they should have done these 4.5 years ago, but at least they're doing them now. And at the end of the day, you just have to restore democracy and give the school district back to the people of Little Rock.
Is it time to give this? Is it time for the state to give control of the Little Rock School District back to the Little Rock School?
I'm not going to say that it should happen today, but it certainly is something that should happen and that ought to be in the works. Local control is very important when it comes to education. It's the most fundamental obligation that a government has to its citizenry. And the people there on the front line who are footing the bill for it should have the most say in who's running it, what the priorities are, etc. Here, I do disagree with Clarke. I believe that the Little Rock School District was heading in a negative direction prior to the state takeover. And part of that, in my opinion, is the manipulation of the electoral process by certain people who wanted to control the district. And unfortunately, they won in those efforts to get more thoughtful people off of the board, and they took the district in the direction that they wanted, and they failed in delivering on a equal and adequate education, which is the requirement. I do, however, agree with Clarke that local control should be returned. We should. The state failed when it didn't issue a clear and concise plan on where the district needed to go and what it was going to do to get there. And the big concern that I have about the law as it's written now is the state gets to take these schools over, they run them, and if the state can't get them out of the ditch, the proverbial ditch, then you have 3 options, one of which is to consolidate, one is to reconstitute, and the third is to annex. Well, what about giving it back to the folks who had it and giving them 5 years to try to see if they can fix it?
All right, I'll give you one more word on this subject there. Anything you want to rebut?
I'll just say that I'm glad that I agree with Sylvester that yes, it needs to go back to the people on the front lines, the ones paying the taxes for these schools. They need to be in control. I will say I disagree with the notion that you can have local control unless you disagree with the people who are elected and then take the results of that democratic process away. Not to say that's the way Sylvester put it, but that's the impact essentially of what he's talking about. And so at the end of the day, the other thing about, so they've said, the statute has 3 options: annexation, consolidation, and reconstitution. And the state board has said that to annex or consolidate is not an option here because the Little Rock School District is surrounded by the Pulaski County Special School District, which is under federal court control right now. So the only option is reconstitute. I think there's a lot of misconception out there about what reconstitute means in the law. I think the state board is under the impression that means they can do whatever they want with the district. They can give part of it back and keep part of it. They could split it up if they want. I don't believe the law authorizes them to do any of that. I think it's a pretty narrow definition of reshaping what the top level of the administration of the school district is at the superintendent and school board level. And that's all that the reconstitute word gives them the authority to do. And I'll close by agreeing with Sylvester where he said, yeah, one of the options should just be to return it to the people, and that's ultimately what I think they should do.
I know we need to move on, Roby, but we're both lawyers. There's not a definition, Clarke, as to what reconstitute means, not in the statute. And so it's going to mean whatever a judge says it means if the citizens feel that the state board gets it wrong. And so one option would be to kind of reshuffle the deck, maybe move some of those schools around, maybe move some of the students in these underperforming schools, put them in different places, see if a new environment gives them a new outcome. I do want to add this. One of the wisest things I ever heard in politics was when Colin Powell said to George W. Bush about Iraq, it's like Pottery Barn, Mr. President. You go in there, you break it, you bought it. And there needs to be more accountability on behalf of the state board because maybe they didn't break it, but they sure hadn't fixed it.
All right, I agree with that.
Let's move on. Sylvester, you are bringing what topic to the table here?
So again, back to local control. There's been a lot said recently about the effort in Pope County to put a casino in Russellville. And
This is the first I've heard of this. Are you telling me there's been an issue going on up there? No,
yeah, so I am all for, there's been a movement, which has included a lawsuit, to enforce the ordinance that the local people passed in Russellville that said, if the only way this thing comes in is if we vote to bring it in and we approve on the operator. The local justices of the peace, the county judge, they ignored their citizenry, they ignored that ordinance, and they went ahead and they signed off on a casino. And I personally believe, as on the other issue, local control should prevail. And the other 2.75 million citizens of Arkansas who want casinos shouldn't be able to shove it down the throats of the people of Polk County.
Clarke?
I think there's really two questions here. One is what they can do and what they ought to do from a moral and political standpoint. Right. I think that the quorum court and the county judge do have the legal authority to do what they've done. And I also think ultimately the end result is going to be the same. I do believe there will be a casino in Pope County, and I believe it'll be the Cherokee application that's approved and ultimately signed off on. The question is how you get there from here. And I think in particular, given the fact that the county judge and several members of the quorum court made a commitment to only allow the casino to move forward if the people of Pope County approved it in a vote, that they ought to stick by their word. If they had never made that commitment, then maybe it would be a different story. But to me, they said they were going to only proceed if the people of Pope County approved it in a vote. I think if it were put up to an election, I think it would prevail. I think the public sentiment has changed. I also think the Cherokee casino people would run a very sophisticated campaign, and I think it would pass at the ballot, and it would give the county judge and the quorum court members the credibility to follow through on what they said they were going to do.
You know, I actually agree with you, Clarke. I do believe that if the local leadership did the right thing and put it to the people, the political headwinds are moving in the direction that would go in their favor. I think the people would approve it. However, I disagree. I believe that a government has, in this form of republic that we have, a government has the rights and powers that the people give them. And so here, in my legal opinion, and this has not been litigated or fully litigated, the people, through that ordinance, have a right and the authority to limit their representatives on what they can and cannot do. And they said, you can't approve it without our consent. And they certainly should have respected that from a practical standpoint, a political standpoint. I would argue in court that they had an obligation to respect it from a legal vantage point, as they would any other ordinance that was passed by the people.
All right, we got to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and throw out one more hot potato political topic with Sylvester Smith and Clarke Tucker. We're back right after this. Welcome back to the program. We are with our hot potato political roundtable here, Sylvester Smith and Clarke Tucker. All right, my turn to throw a question out on the table here. Mine's more hypothetical. So if either one of you could put something on the ballot in 2020, you could just wave this magic wand and you'd have your signatures and you'd be there, what would be the issue that you would put on the ballot in 2020?
I went first last time, so you want to let Sylvester go?
Well, I would love to have garden variety tort reform, which would mean a $1 million cap on punitive damages. we had tort reform. I believe tort reform is an important thing to provide certainty and cost control for business owners, especially small business owners that I work with every day. And frankly, the legislature, due to the influence of the nursing home lobby, they screwed the pooch on this every time. And so we need some simple garden variety tort reform, and that would be my ballot initiative.
All right, Clarke?
I think we're going to see a nonpartisan redistricting measure on the ballot, and I think hopefully we'll see that do well. I'd like to see really a variety of issues in the same vein, which is anti-corruption, empowers the people, limits the influence of the special interests in government. Probably the first thing would be to protect the people's ability to bring citizen-initiated constitutional amendment and ballot initiatives, because the legislature has tried to limit that in the last session, but there's a whole lot of other things I would like to see that I've worked on in the past, like dark money. I like open primaries. Dan Douglas and I worked on that together. Automatic voter registration, ethics reform, because we've had obviously some corruption in the legislature.
What corruption?
So I think all of those in some form or another, I think those should be put to a vote by the people.
All right, if I had to throw my one out there, we got to fix the sovereign immunity situation that's out there. I'm not an attorney like you guys are, but people ought to have the right to bring a lawsuit against the state if they've done something that is clearly involves some sort of liability there. And right now the policy of the state is the governor decides whether or not he wants to invoke sovereign immunity or not on some of those, and that's not clear public policy to me.
Well, don't forget, we do have the Arkansas State Claims Commission, which I am a member, so that people can air their grievances if they've been harmed by state government. But I do agree that for other instances that we don't have dominion over, like forcing the state to do something or making the state stop doing something, the waters are very muddy as to what the citizens can do.
All right, 3 good things right there. Actually, you threw like 12 out there, but
He
he's
did.
running with his time, so we do it.
That's what happens when you ask a lawyer, right?
Sylvester and Clarke, thank y'all so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Roby.
for having us.
That's all for today's program. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.